This week's episode on Cup of Joe, Dr. Jason Norsworthy joins us and answers a few questions at the Great Soybean Trait Debate meeting we had on Monday.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Cup of Joe. This is episode number 4, and today we have Ben Pieper, our agronomist, and Tommy Johns, regional sales manager for Iowa. So, Tommy, what was the big thing this week?
The Great Soybean Trait Debate, Joe. We had 2 really key meetings with Dr. Jason Norsworthy. One was in Cedar Rapids and one was in Burlington. And probably one of the greatest takeaways and information that we got was an interview that Turk actually is in the field and got to do with Jason himself. And a lot of good information, and I believe that we're going to have a chance to show that segment here for you.
So I was able to catch up with Jason Norsworthy here at the Great Trait Debate here in Burlington before we get the meeting started here. So we're going to try and have some parts of this for Cup of Joe for this weekend. But one of the questions our sales manager asked is, how key is to have metribuzin in the package when using the LLGT27 and elite herbicide?
You know, Turk, metribuzin is really a backbone of the residual weed control programs that we have, especially in light of the amount of resistance that we see out there in the marketplace today. And, you know, based on our research, metribuzin with Elite 27 is an extremely strong residual. We'll see 4 to 6 weeks of high level of residual control of things like palmer amaranth. And of course, up in this geography, you'd be talking about weeds like water hemp. And it's really the backbone of what we want to do in that weed control program. And I think a key component is to make sure that when you choose a soybean variety, that you're trying to choose one that has high tolerance to metribuzin. I know your company's actually screens for that. We at the University of Arkansas, we screen a wealth of germplasm to make sure that we're choosing varieties that are excellent tolerance to that chemistry.
Yep. It's important to note that Elite 27 does not have a herbicide registration yet, but we're hopeful that we can have one by planting time next year.
That's correct.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the studies you've done with Roundup Ready mixed with XtendiMax or other herbicides?
Yeah, we've done some research this past year looking at making field applications of XtendiMax with Roundup PowerMax, some other glyphosate formulations, and ultimately what we see is that when we mix those together, we begin to lower the pH of that spray solution, and in turn, ultimately what we see is the volatility of XtendiMax begins to increase and risk for off-target movement begins to become more substantial than what it does when we spray the products alone. And not only is this research that's been conducted by the University of Arkansas, but colleagues across the Mid-South as well as some in the Midwest have taken part in projects this past year. And I was actually attending a meeting here just a few weeks ago where I saw 11 experiments were summarized showing that Roundup PowerMax addition to XtendiMax increases the volatility of the XtendiMax.
And that's due to the lowering the pH.
That is correct. We think that lowering of the pH appears to be a major component of that. And for that reason, you know, the label currently states that you need to consult with your local representative as to what products may potentially lower the pH and increase the volatility of that product.
Very good. What advice can you give farmers who are trying to make a decision on their soybean cropping plans?
You know what my response to that would be, Turk, is there's a lot of programs out there that work, and what I continue to talk about is, at least from a weed control standpoint, whether it be the LLGT27, Liberty Link, the Extend, we can design weed control programs that are quite effective. And I think the key to that, though, is making sure that we have a package, a weed control package, for which we're going to ensure that we're overlaying residual herbicides. We're starting with a good residual. The thing I like about the LLGT27 is there's some really strong residuals that we have an opportunity to use in that cropping system that we may not have or we don't have necessarily potentially in other cropping systems or with other traits. So I think the key there is starting clean, overlaying residual herbicides, and then making sure you choose a trait platform that's going to provide you an effective post-emergence herbicide to clean up what few escapes come through those residual herbicides.
Kind of a follow-up question on that, Jason, is we hear a lot of comments about you can't mix glufosinate and glyphosate together without and still have good performance. Do you have any comments?
Well, you know, my response to that, Turk, is that we've been doing that in the Mid-South now since 2012. We commonly grow cotton. In my geography, we've done a wealth of research looking at mixing Liberty and mixing Roundup together, and that program, from a weed control standpoint, has been quite effective year in and year out, and we have a wealth of data to support that. And what I would tell folks is that, you know, if you have Palmer amaranth in your field, or if you have water hemp in your field, you mix those two together. The glyphosate may not be bringing a lot to the table, but it's not necessarily going to reduce the activity of the Liberty in that mixture. And then we talk about grasses, and folks say, well, you know, I've got grasses in that field too. And my response to that is that overall, when we take a look at glyphosate plus Liberty or Interline, the other glufosinate products that are out there today, we do not see a reduction in control, especially if those are timely applications. If we're out there spraying an 18, 24-inch weed, which we shouldn't be there, absolutely you can begin to see some issues with that. But we need to make sure that we're making timely applications across these acres.
Very good. With the new label changes in 2019, what would you expect to see the movement of off-target claims go up or down? What about ornamentals?
You know, if you take a look at the label changes, there really wasn't a substantial number of label changes. If the label changes themselves, I think now that the new restriction is 1 o'clock after sunrise to 2 hours prior to sunset. There was a good bit of spraying of dicamba. If you look back at 2017 in the state of Missouri as well as the state of Tennessee, after a period of spraying, they actually went in and looked at restrictions such as, I believe in those states, it was from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and there really was very little impact it had on dicamba volatility or reducing the off-target movement of dicamba. The other comment that I would make on that is individuals need to be mindful of how many hours truly they're in a day that you can make a spray. I know Bill Johnson with Purdue University just released an article last week, and Bill made the comment that in the state of Indiana, there were 39 spray hours in the month of June. So with that, you really have to begin to ask yourself, can you get over vast acres and make this application without violating the label? And we need to make sure that we're definitely doing things right. We're trying to follow the label as closely as possible when we're making applications.
Yeah, another one of the label changes was that 57-foot border all the way around the field now, and it's my understanding that that cannot be sprayed. Is that correct?
No, that is correct. And there's a 57-foot border around the field as it relates to the Endangered Species Act. And my understanding is there's counties across the U.S. that have endangered species. I know the EPA actually has a website called Bulletin Live, and I've been told there may be 299 counties across the U.S. that actually are going to fall under this Endangered Species Act. And with that, before a grower goes and makes an application, they're going to have to come to that website and truly understand whether there are endangered species in that county or not.
And that's not necessarily just plants. That's anything that's labeled as an endangered species.
You know, I'm not certain how the EPA calculates that. I do know when you go to that website, it's my understanding that you're going to put in a product, and then they're going to populate the counties, or at least where you're looking at spraying, color those in if there's potentially an endangered species there.
I know. We looked up our local county, and it was mussels and bats were on the endangered species list, and they were listed that you could not spray.
Okay, there you go.
So not just plant species. We talked a little bit about the label changes as it pertains to pH. What about adding other additives that could change pH as well, not just glyphosate? Is that still going to be an issue that has to be dealt with?
You know, I think that's something that we don't have a very good understanding of at this point. I'll say, you know, I've spoken to several weed scientists across the U.S. We have not gone out and done a lot of work to understand to what extent the pH has changed. The one thing I can tell you is every time you add something to the tank, it has potential to impact the pH of that spray solution. And we also need to keep in mind that there are products on, for instance, Extend, the Ingenia labels. There are products that actually have passed droplet spectrum test. So those are labeled products based on droplet spectrum. but it tells you nothing about whether those products are going to increase the volatility. And for that reason, I know the label says call your local extension agent if you want an answer to this, but my recommendation is call the manufacturer. Ultimately, that's their label. They need to stand behind that label. That's not our responsibility to understand what will or will not increase the volatility.
Well, thank you for your time, Jason, here before we get ready to start the meeting tonight, and hope that everything works out well for you in Arkansas with the changes, new label changes down there, and we look forward to a new year here.
Appreciate it, Turk, and looking forward to 2019 growing season.
Oh, that was very informative. I'm glad Turk had a chance to catch up with Dr. Jason Norsworthy with some really good pertinent information.
Yeah.
So, Ben, what did you take away from these meetings?
One of the most important things that I think that we need to take away from these meetings from an agronomy standpoint is how complex everything, the whole herbicide world is becoming, and the best way to combat that is being educated, not only being educated by the companies that provide the technology, but unbiased university information for what Jason's given us. So it's a complex herbicide world out there, and I think we gave our farmers an excellent opportunity here to try to catch up to where the universities are at.
And that was our goal, just basically give them some good, solid information. We didn't control what was going to be said, but
we didn't know what Jason's slides were. We never saw them before.
And I think it's just, he does a lot of basic research. He talks to the EPAs. We have some great weed scientists in Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri, and we chose to go down to Arkansas, mainly because they have some really tough situations down there, which could potentially be here someday. So it was a great turnout, lots of good folks.
And you know what I really appreciate about Jason is he only speaks only to data. You know, it's all data driven. He doesn't sell any soybeans for that matter. It's all data driven. So,
well, that's our segment for today, and I hope all of you had a great Thanksgiving. You know, we are so blessed in this country to have a surplus of food, and the American farmer makes that possible. And as you sat down at your table on Thursday for Thanksgiving, I hope you gave a little bit of credit to our American farmer and the great job that he does in feeding our country and a lot of folks throughout the world. So, well, that's it for this segment. I'm out of Joe, so we'll see you next week. And we got some pretty exciting news to share with you next week, so stay tuned.
On next week's episode, we will cover subjects from the Integrated Crop Management Conference in Ames, Iowa.